Ivan K. Walinyolo will be rejoining us a little bit later. We seem to be grappling there with some vagaries of technology, but as soon as the connectivity is back, we shall be able to understand what exactly is getting underway in NTV with regard to the 6th annual Tuberculosis and Leprosy Stakeholders Conference. Let me return to studio and talk about accessibility to buildings and fire safety. Now, in many cities across the globe, the style and the nature of buildings is that it has to be functional in terms of accessibility for just about anybody who wants to use any part of that building. But most importantly, fire safety, the ability to have exits that are convenient to the people who may be in that building, but even the flexibility of the use of the tools and equipment to fight fire is very important. That is a story that you won't see very regularly within certain cities, including Kampala. But the National Building Review Board is working around the clock to ensure that some of these concerns are addressed as they should be, so that we can enjoy being in a beautiful and functional city with all the buildings that are deserving of a city. I'm joined by the Manager Investigations at the National Building Review Board, Engineer Anthony Ruchuche. Many thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
How are you doing?
I'm well.
Great. Now, we have grappled with standards, we've grappled with issues around accessibility to buildings, yet we see a lot of buildings mushrooming. Many of them are described as skyscrapers, designed to make the city look metropolitan and very modern, but it shocks you when you begin to make your way through some of these buildings. For example, the disabled have trouble getting there because the ramps, where you find a ramp, it is either too steep or just not functional to the average disabled person. Where you find fire safety equipment and precautions undertaken, there's a lot that is left to be desired. Just give us a preview of where we are, where we ought to be, and what is being done to ensure that we achieve these strategic goals in as far as accessibility is concerned.
Thank you very much. Good morning, viewers of NTV. And thank you for this opportunity.
You're most welcome.
To the board to come and talk to Ugandans about issues to do with accessibility and fire safety. Like you rightly said, when you walk through Kampala, there's challenges to do with accessibility. And maybe to start off, for any functional building, you need to think about the most vulnerable. Even outside buildings, if you're a teacher and you're sitting an exam, you'll set an exam for the weakest student. If you set for the brightest student, you'll have failures in the class. An engineer, when he's designing a structure, he designs for the worst case scenario. If you design for the best case scenario, then you have an issue. And I think the rains the last few days have actually undressed us. Because maybe we are designing for situations which are not the worst case scenarios. So even for accessibility, we must think about the most vulnerable in society. And also mindful that when we are designing as engineers, we need not only look at those amongst our communities who have disabilities. Each of us, each Ugandan, me and you, is a candidate for disability.
That's right.
If you walk into Mulago and see the victims of border borders, you realize that each of us is a victim. Is a candidate for access for disability. We are growing old. The life expectancy of Ugandans is now about 64 years. The older you grow, the less mobile you'll be, and you will need facilities, you will need buildings that allow you to access as many areas as possible. So what are we doing? We have started from ensuring that we have standards. Usually when you walk into a structure and you tell the developer that this building is not accessible to persons with disabilities, he'll ask you, to what standard should I build it? The ramp that you talked about, which is very steep, how steep? What is the highest gradient? What's the maximum gradient that I should design for? So we've put those into place. We have the National Building Standards for Accessibility 2019, which have been published. So we are giving industry the minimum standard that you must meet if the structure is going to be considered approved for construction.
And function.
So we have the standards in place. We are engaging the industry, developers, professionals, to tell them that yes, we have standards and you must abide with them. The approval process now, we look at those before they approve your structures, and also to re-emphasize that construction without a building permit in Uganda is now illegal, according to the Building Control Act, BCA 2013. And so the expectation is that if a developer applies for a building permit, the people assessing that application will look at accessibility concerns as core to them making a decision on whether to grant that building permission or not.
Okay.
In terms of compliance, recently we did an audit of about 2,306 buildings in Kampala, Kampala Metropolitan. And the compliance to facilities for persons with disabilities was a dismal 11.8%, about 12%, which is very, very, very low for a city. And the city is growing, so each of us, the public, the local authorities in charge of approval of construction, the board as regulator, the ministry as the policy organ, the professionals who are at the center of construction now must work in earnest to ensure this figure goes up. Because like I said, all of us are candidates for disability. So we need buildings that are functional, that will allow us to use them at that time when we are not as mobile as we would want to be.
Okay. Now, that brings into the question, over the last 20 years, the mushrooming buildings around the city and its metropolitan areas have been mesmerizing. Yeah, literally for every 6 months. If you haven't made your way to a certain part of the city, when you return, there's a new building in place. When the rains come, we've noticed that the floods simply sweep through. Well, floods are sweeping through anywhere. We've seen floods in New York. We've seen floods in major cities across the globe. It's not validation that they should happen here. When it comes to approval of buildings, at what stage is compliance best enforced? Because we see the buildings in town. Yeah. These buildings go through approval processes.
Correct.
Now that they are up, our thinking, for those who are not within the key policymakers' environment, is that that building was approved, but it doesn't meet the standards. Where are the loopholes now?
Thank you very much. We had gaps in the legal framework until the enactment of the Building Control Act 2013, which was operationalized in 2018. And some of these gaps meant that now approvals for construction, for example, would be done by physical planning committees. Tapping into the existing laws, Physical Planning Act, the Public Health guidelines, and other laws. But there were many gaps. Because the risk is that if you have a physical planning committee approving construction, then are you sure that the input of the engineer who is charged with, for example, ensuring the building is strong and resilient in the floods you talked about, would be sufficient? So what the Building Control Act, when it came into place, the idea is that now we have a separation between what we call development permission and building permission. And the difference is, if NTV wants to, for example, put up a structure, they will apply to KCCA, physical planning, and say, I want to put up a 20-story building in Nakasero.
Amen to that.
So the physical, we hope for that.
Okay.
So the Physical Planning Committee of KCCA would now look at the development plan and say in Nakasero, it is residential.
It's residential.
We should not have structures more than 12 meters high.
That's right.
We cannot have offices there. It's purely residential. And they write to you and they say, no, according to our development plan, you cannot have an office block that high in Nakasero. Or they will say, yes, it fits within our development plan. Please proceed.
Go ahead.
Now that's done by the Physical Planning Committee. Their job is the physical planning. To say we've allowed you to put this development here because it fits within our planning. Once you as the developer gets that development permission, then you apply to the Building Committee of KCC again to give you building permission. Now this is where the engineering really starts in. How will the structure stand? Are the soils safe enough? How is the stormwater being drained off the site? Has the architect provided for accessibility issues? The mechanical and electrical engineers will have to certify that the fittings, the wirings, the fire detection and fighting equipment is provided for in your design. And once they are comfortable, they will now give you building permission. So where are the gaps? We have had a slow uptake of the provisions in the Building Control Act, partly because the law, one, requires that the accounting officers for the districts, the 130 plus districts now, would have to appoint building committees. In some districts that has not been done, and we are engaging these accounting officers that it is your duty to ensure that you have planned decent and safe building structures in your jurisdiction. So you need to have a building committee in every district and urban authority. That's right. Then the donkey work for the building committee in terms of inspection of constructions and demolitions and etc., and as also as technical advisor at the building committee, lies into a position now that the law calls the building control officer. So every district and urban authority also should have a building control officer. Now we have some challenges that the district structures don't have that position, for example, and we are engaging public service. We are engaging them to ensure that is provided for as soon as possible, and this person is appointed. For the cities and municipalities, they have. So there is no excuse why we cannot have that person. So the gaps are there, but the framework is now clearer. It makes it clear that the Building Control Act now takes precedence over the other laws. And now our next challenge will be to ensure that this is being enforced.
Yeah, including the fact that people should not get a building permission before development permission.
Correct. So actually now in most cities, for example, we started with cities, the building control process has now been automated through a system called the Building Industry Management System, BIMS, developed by Ugandans and managed by Ugandans. So you would previously you would walk into KCCA with your papers, put them on the desk, they take them to some committee, and then they call you back. Now everything is automated. So if you don't have development permission, the process will not start.
It can't go ahead. All right, the same sentiments can be used to understand the dynamics around fire safety and the fact that enforcement ought to be done in order to lessen the amount of the incidence of fires within the city. But very lastly, there is something about awarding people who actually do the right thing and make our city the best possible city to live in by adhering to the standards and ensuring that they do exactly what you want them to do. What are these? When are these awards, and who exactly are you going to be looking out to say thank you for doing the right thing?
Thank you. Just a minute on fire safety. We have a fire problem in this country.
That's right.
I want to be on record on that. The police says on a daily they receive 3 fire alerts daily. Daily.
Within Kampala metropolitan area, or
and those are the reported cases.
Those are reported cases
from the fire brigade. Yes, just yesterday but one, we had a fire at Mulago National Referral Hospital. A few weeks ago, we had a fire at a school in Masaka. It led to the death of 7 children and 10 in the ICU. So we have a fire problem, and the majority of these, for every 2 in 3 fires, there are human actions that are responsible for that. So we have a fire problem in this country. So the National Building Control Awards 2023 are an initiative to help recognize those in our communities that have tried to do the right thing. We know that even when adherence to the framework is still low, we would want to do better. There are those who are doing the right thing. So the National Building Review Board, in partnership with Uganda National Action on Physical Disability, UNAPID, have organized the National Building Control Awards 2023 to recognize those, and that will happen tomorrow. The award ceremony is tomorrow, 8th of December at Imperial Royal Hotel. And we have heroes that would want to recognize and present the public and say, this is doable, they've done it, and we want to say, please emulate them. So we have 3 categories of awards. The first one is to buildings, but that's split into another 7 subcategories. So we have the office or civic blocks, we have the commercial mercantile buildings, we have health institutions, school institutions, we have religious or faith-based institutions, we have condominium or residential category. So in each of those categories, we'll have a winner. engineer. And then we have a category for the building committees that I talked about, who are in charge of building control at the local authority level and urban authority level. And then we are also recognizing the best building control officer, the technical guy, the one that approves the minor structures, the Class C buildings, and who also advises the building committee and also implements the decisions of the building committee.
Engineer Ruchushe Anthony, Manager Investigations at the National Building Review Board, many thanks for the perspective and enlightening us on what goes on behind the scenes before the skyscrapers go up.
Thank you.
Let's now go to Entebbe, where my man Ivan K. Walinyolo is standing by. The 6th annual conference of tuberculosis and leprosy stakeholders is beginning today. A very